Hello, I'm Louisa Higgins. I'm the Arts Administrator for Riverside County Office of Education, and this is a recorded version of my training for arts organizations and their artists in residence. And in this particular presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of the art standards and the framework, as well as some classroom management and student engagement strategies. So this is a presentation I have done for several museums and arts organizations, and I'm happy to share it with you this way virtually. And it's most helpful if you print out the worksheet and also the philosophical foundations and lifelong goals, which are as PDFs on our webpage. So that kind of helps you do note taking and follow along as I run through the presentation. So welcome. A little bit about me as a presenter. So I've got a few pictures from my background. So I started out as a professional interior designer before moving into education. I've been a practicing artist and poet almost my whole life. You can see in the top right, I'm doing a reading at Barnes & Noble. And in the bottom, I'm in the City of Palm Springs art show. I'm also a big fan of the artist Ai Weiwei. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, it's the time I met him at a book signing in Los Angeles. I was in the classroom for 14 years, and I was a TOSA and a coordinator for 12 years, and I'm in my 4th year now as the arts administrator for Riverside County. So I've had such a great deal of fun and joy, both in teaching and in working specifically with the arts. So that's my background. All right, so moving into the good stuff. So this is a roadmap of significant events in arts education. It's been a wild ride the last few years. First of all, you can see in 2016, we have specific theater and dance credentials, which we didn't have before. So that's really important in elevating those art forms and have them be taken seriously with their own credentials and not just an add-on or a split credential with something else. Then in 2019, which is the same time almost as I started with the county, the new art standards came out. And so that was a big sea change. I know myself, I had practically memorized the old standards, and it's very uncomfortable to switch gears so completely, although at this point in time, I've come to love them and become very familiar, but I understand how hard that is, how hard that change is. And then right behind it, we were still experiencing the pandemic. We had the framework come out in 2020. And so that gives guidance on how to teach the arts. And I really like so many aspects of it and things that are pedagogies that are interwoven and things that are called out in it. So we'll talk about both of those. And I think you're really going to like it. And then finally, the next year was the instructional materials adoption. And I was fortunate enough to be on one of those committees reviewing visual arts curriculum. And so 3 curricula were passed, 2 visual arts and 1 in music. And so as you can see, it's been a period of great change and excitement in the world of the arts. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the arts standards. And so in simple terms, these are what we are teaching. Okay, it's the what. And just a note, these are notes that I wrote up after my beginning to study and work with the standards. So they're common goals. And in California, we adopted based on the National Art Standards. So we're really trying to work in coordination with all of the states. It's important in the arts that we have standards for our credibility, that we are a core content area, just like all the other contents, and we have those standards to back it up. I don't want you to view standards as an absolute mandate to be followed blindly, or that would restrict you from innovation. So they're abstracts, but you can use them and implement them in ways that serve lots of individual needs. And here's a screenshot from the National Core Art Standards, and you can see they kind of made it look like a scientific, the periodic elements, right, on a scientific table, a CR, PR, RE, and CN. And as I mentioned before, these were adopted from the National Art Standards. And again, we were trying to have more cohesion across the country and what was happening with the arts. And of course, that's very helpful to students as they graduate from high school and move into college or professional programs, that they're going to come out with the same level of education as their peers. And if you're wondering who wrote them, Here's a list of the people. I used to always wonder that in the classroom, like, who's writing this stuff? Who's making this up? So you can see there's a lot of people who are very well versed and experts in their particular arts discipline, as well as state education agencies and students themselves. So in case you're not familiar at this point, there are now 5 recognized art forms. There used to be 4. We now have media arts, which is kind of a meta medium, which encompasses graphic design, photography, film, podcasting, and so forth. So there are now 5. And this is what I was mentioning to you, and you should have this as a handout or make this presentation easier to digest or comprehend. It's a new aspect of the standards called the Philosophical Foundations and Lifelong Goals. And I've grown to be very fond of them. And here are the 6 ways of looking at the arts. And it's kind of what's our why. And what you want to be thinking about is, what are the foundations we're setting up for students, and how do these lead to a lifelong engagement with the arts? So it's either as communication, creative personal realization, history, culture, and connectors, well-being, community engagement, and the arts, of course, as a profession. So there's 6 ways of looking at the arts, and they're not mutually exclusive. And you might look at this list and see several that really speak to you. I would expect that you would. So what I'd like you to do is you can go ahead and stop the recording for a couple of minutes and review the philosophical foundations and figure out which ones really speak to you, and pick one. And then on the worksheet, you can reflect and write down 3 reasons why this particular foundation speaks to you. And you can also see and jot down a note about how does that philosophical foundation lead to a lifelong goal for your students. I can tell you, for me, the arts, I feel very strongly about the arts as a means to well-being, because I had gotten away from my painting practice for a number of years as I was a young mother. And I had a situation where one of my children was very, very ill, and I had to get up around the clock to medicate him. And I started painting again. And that was a very difficult period in my life. I was grief-stricken. I was scared. I had 2 other children to be raising. And art was really a means of salvation, of expression, and it got me through. So that's a personal example. So that's what I want you to look at, those examples, and think of one of the ones, or maybe 2, that really speak to you, and go ahead and make your notes for future reference. But definitely hold on to that chart. I think it's very meaningful in us thinking as educators, why do we do what we do? What are the reasons today and also tomorrow for what we do? Another big element in the new standards is the 4 artistic processes. So these new standards, rather than being outcome driven, are really process driven. So it's about the experience. And so we have these 4 artistic processes that design and organize the learning. So the first one, and if you remember that little chart, CR stands for creating. And I think this one's pretty easy to perceive. And so in definition, it's conceiving and developing new artistic ideas and work. And so I have a little guy there, and I put in layman's term, artists getting ready to create art. So that's the first one, creating. Then you have what I call the 3 Ps in that little periodic element table chart. Oops, excuse me, banged my wrist on the table. It's PR. So it depends on the art form. So performing, that would be dance, music, and theater. If it's visual arts, it's presenting the work. And if it's media arts, it's producing the work. So that, in layman's terms, is the artist doing or showing their art. Then we move into an artistic process, which is newer to us and I find really interesting, responding, RE. So that's understanding and evaluating how the arts convey meaning. And if you look at this picture, it's showing young people in a museum, and it looks like the teacher or the docent is talking about the artwork, and they're making notes, and they're probably doing analysis and critique. And so this is a really important part of interacting with art, is our response to it. It's not a flat experience. There is engagement between the viewer and the art form. And then the next one is also new to the new standards, which is connecting. And so that means we're relating artistic ideas and work with personal meaning. and external context. So it's that real personalization, the artist or the audience connecting the art to their own lived experience. So those relating and connecting pieces are new and I think highly meaningful in the process of understanding and experiencing and making art. So again, with your worksheet, you can shut this recording down for a few minutes and explore the 4 artistic processes. You can give a 1-sentence summary of each of them as you understand it from what I just said, and perhaps give an example from your own classroom. So the 4 processes are creating, the 3 Ps, performing, presenting, or producing, responding, or connecting. And then my little reflection question at the bottom is, which of the artistic processes really resonates as a current or future practice? Okay, so another just big part of the new art standards are the 4 artistic processes. The third element that I want to call out is the standards themselves, the 11 anchor standards. So anybody who's been working in education for any period of time is familiar with standards. So these run parallel across the arts disciplines, the 5 disciplines and grade levels. And these are really the tangibles for us achieving artistic literacy with our students. So first, you have our process of creating, and it has 3 anchor standards, 1, 2, and 3. And I've bolded the words I wanted you to especially notice. We're generating ideas, we're developing and organizing them, and then we're refining them. When you move into the process of the 3 Ps, there's 3 more standards, 4, 5, and 6. So analysis, interpretation, selection, more developing and refining, and conveying meaning. For responding, we have some different words: perceiving and analyzing, interpreting, applying criteria. So you can see those 3 are even different from the first 6 that we've seen. So there's 3 more. And then we get into connecting. It has 2. And so that's where you see personal experiences coming in, and also society, culture, and historical. So there's 11 of them that are broken up between the 4 artistic processes. So using your worksheet, I'd like you to stop the recording and look at these 2 anchor standards. 1, how do you enable students to generate, conceptualize artistic ideas and work? And anchor standard 11, give 1 example of how you might, as the teacher, incorporate cultural or historical context into your practice. So let's jot down a few notes about these, because you are certainly doing these, I'm thinking, in your classroom. Anchor standard 11, maybe not so much yet, but anchor standard 1 for sure. And then my reflection question is, why has anchor standard 11 come to be so significant in recent years? So you think of things that happened during the pandemic, if you think of Black Lives Matter, why has that really come to the fore in terms of us as arts teachers or artists in residence? So those were the 3 main elements that I wanted you to really know about the standards, which was the philosophical foundations and lifelong goals, the processes, the 4 processes, and the 11 anchor standards. And so here are the reflection questions. First one, what is more important, the process or the outcome of art making? And then secondly, why are the philosophical foundations and lifelong goals important to keep in mind as we're teaching? So I leave those with you. Okay, moving into the arts framework. So if the standards are what we teach, the framework is how we go about teaching it. It's the how-to. And I really like this graphic. This is in the framework, giving the 3 variations of an art lesson. So in the first top left circle, you have arts as curriculum. So that means standalone. That means that's all you're doing, is like, all I'm doing is teaching a dance lesson, just dance. Arts enhanced curriculum, in the second circle to the right, is when you have another content area and then you're adding the art lesson as an add-on, as an extra, right? It's kind of the side dish. And then in the third one, arts integrated curriculum, it's when you have two content areas that are co-equal. So it could be two art forms. You could have music and dance integrated, or you could have something like social studies and theater integrated. And so they're both important. They both have standards and they're both assessed. So that is the three variations that you see in art lessons. So you have to think to yourself, which ones do I teach? Which one or ones do I teach, and am I intentional about that? So to further break them down, again, arts is curriculum. So it's learning art or art for art's sake. So if I'm teaching a lesson on perspective, this would be strictly be a visual art lesson for this graphic I have here. Arts enhanced curriculum, I'm using it as a device or just strategy to support something else. But none of the objectives of the art form are explicit. So if this teacher is doing a tableau of an historical event to reinforce something in history, but isn't teaching any of the theater concepts, just strike a pose, then that's only art enhanced curriculum. And then finally, the most sophisticated is arts integrated curriculum, where you have two content areas. Like I said, they're both equally important. They are both assessed. They both have standards. So for instance, this could be a dance lesson where they are choreographing a math or science concept. So they have to know the math or science concept that they're choreographing, and then they need to know some things about dance, like time, space, and energy that they're including, and then they are assessed on both. So I wanted to share with you some of the pedagogies and priorities for arts education. This recording is taking place in 2022, but beyond. These are what are listed in the framework as having our attention as arts educators. And of course, pedagogy is very big in education, and I just want to dip into this a little bit. And I have the acronyms to the right, because if you're an artist in residence or working for an arts organization, you might not be throwing around those acronyms quite the way we do in education. Not saying it's a good or a bad thing, it's just how it is. So we have social and emotional learning, we have culturally relevant teaching and learning, and we have universal design for learning. And there's also high priority on the arts for English language learners, the way that the arts enhance and improve educational outcomes for them. And also that we are really paying attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the curriculum and instruction that we are providing for students. So that is what is really being embraced in the arts framework. So just to go over those pedagogies and not make assumptions of how much you do or do not know. And of course, if you see one that is of interest to you and you don't know about it, it's very easy to go online after watching this presentation and really dig into it and know more. So the first one is social and emotional learning. And there are 5 capacities. They're color coded and you see them on this wheel. So the first 2 have to do with self-awareness and self-management. Second 2 are about interactions with other people, right? Social awareness, relationship skills. And then finally, you have responsible decision making. And New Jersey actually has something you can go online and find where it's a crosswalk where it incorporates arts, standards, and then these capacities and shows where they come together and how to use them accordingly. But long before I ever knew what SEL was, I knew that the arts are an excellent place for social and emotional learning to take place, because so much what we do in the arts has emotional content, is expressive, right? So it's a natural, but it's good as a practitioner and as an educator to be aware of these pedagogies and these terms and how they affect the work that we do. Cultural relevance. So for us in terms of the arts, this means, and I myself was guilty of this, and I'm just laughing as I look at the slide because I think I spelled canon like a cannon in a war, so forgive me for that, please. I'll fix that. But moving away from just strictly teaching the Western European canon, which was what I was always really comfortable with or familiar with, I guess, and then starting to embrace cultures from all over the world. And when you do that, especially when students see themselves in the teaching and learning, you create rapport and respect, and then you can demand rigor from your students. So this is incredibly important and is on the forefront of what we are concerned with in excellent arts teaching. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is also very prevalent across the board in education. And it really means that we're kind of not catering to one style of learning, we're really opening it up. And so the three main concepts is there's multiple means of engagement, like giving the students their why. How do you get them interested? Do they have multiple choices? Are their feelings engaged? The second one is multiple means of representation, which is what. So you're teaching the different strategies, like you're using sound, you're using something on the board. You're giving them different ways of figuring out what you're teaching. And then finally, oh my goodness, another typo. I'm really gonna have to go back and clean this up. So multiple means of action and expression, which is how. So how do students show you what they know? Do they have multiple ways of doing it? This is pretty demanding as a teacher because you're not just doing one way of anything. You're trying to deliver the material in a certain way, but you have different choices and have students express it back to you in different ways. So it's really something I recommend that as you develop confidence in it, you can do it more and more, but it requires a great deal of preparation. But again, the arts are rich for this, and we have so many creative ways of approaching things that it really lends itself to universal design for learning. English language learners feel so strongly about this. This is a picture of me teaching, I don't know, 15 or better years ago. And it was a program that I ran for students who were newcomers. And so I had a little bit of Spanish and they had a very tiny little bit of English. And yet we did a 6-week, very successful calligraphy program. And what we found is that when we have students, when we let them play, when we let them get in and do the arts and interact, language comes more naturally. We tend to have a very artificial structure for teaching language, very rule-based, sentence frames and grammar and so on. But what we find is when we give access to the arts instead of remediating students and keeping them out of the arts, that they learn the language faster and more easily, and they reclassify sooner. So I really want to bring that point home. It's incredibly important. Also, diversity, equity, and inclusion are called out in the framework, and that means lots of things, right? Ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, LGBTQ plus, children with special needs. So in the arts, we want to be thoughtful about our inclusion and representation in everything that we do. So a couple of reflection questions just for you to take on and think about in your free time is, how do the arts promote well-being for students? I think that's a no-brainer, and all of you will have some substantial answers for that. And also, in what way are the arts an on-ramp for multilingual students, or students who already have a language and they're acquiring another one that's fairly complex, right, and difficult to learn? How are the arts so helpful in that process for young people? So now moving into, I'm just had a little bit of fun with this, classroom management tips and tricks. And I had to really go back, because I've been in education more than 30 years to think about learning the hard way. Because I remember the first year just getting run right over by students because I was so nice and I wanted them all to like me. And I think it's a typical mistake of young teachers or new teachers. And I remember a couple of things. One of my methods teachers, that's who teaches you the different content areas when you're getting a teacher certification, said, if you don't give students something to do, they will find something to do, and you won't like it, and that's for sure. And also, who's the alpha in the room? And in other words, who's in charge? And students feel more comfortable when they know that someone else is in charge, or an adult has things under control. And when there isn't that sense of security, that's when the wheels start to come off. So those are some comments or quotes that I learned early on in my career. So here's my first tip, especially for artists and residents who are coming in from an arts organization or hired by the school district to work in a classroom, is that you need to really partner with the classroom teacher and have them be part of what you're doing, and not checked out. Like you don't want them grading papers or doing something else. You want them to be part of whatever it is you're doing. And also find out what their attention getters. Like I used to always do 3, 2, 1, you know, or class. I mean, there's lots of different ones, but find out in every classroom that you go into, what is that teacher's attention getter? Because that's what the students are used to and will respond to most quickly, and will save you a lot of grief. My second tip is establishing your norms and rules at the beginning of every lesson and repeating it every time you come back to visit that particular classroom. And I would carry it on a laminated chart, and I would keep it short. So these are just my 3 examples. Listen for the attention getting signal, which I just referenced. Do not speak when I'm giving instructions. Actively participate in the activity to the best of your ability, right? So just having a few things, but you know, like if I walk into the room, it's Mrs. Higgins, this is what she expects, because students will work to your expectation. And if none are given, there's not really a standard or a bar for them to reach for, right? Tip number 3. So I'm a quiet person and rather shy, and I do not like to raise my voice. And so I really worked, you know, I said the first thing was, you know, give students something to do or they'll find something to do. So my classroom is fast paced, but also I use positive reinforcement. So I was really about calling out things that were going well and exemplars to the rest of the students and reinforcing with praise. I used a lot of carrot and not a lot of stick because that's my personality. And that's what really worked for me. And I think as artists, we're sensitive and we want to keep it positive, right? And this one kind of goes along with it, extinguishing negative behavior. So sometimes students will do things just to get your attention. And if you ignore it or have the classroom teacher address it, they're not going to get that reinforcement from you. You are not going to be throwing gas on the fire. And you do not want to be sucked into an interaction between one student while the whole other rest of the class is sitting around watching that or waiting on you. It takes time away from valuable teaching time. And the last one is to remind you just how incredible teaching artists are. When you come into the classroom, you are a gift and you bring all your joy and your passion and your enthusiasm. And it really, I think students respond to you based on your energy. It's important to learn students' names. We all love it when someone knows our name or have little paper name tags or something that's there every time you come in so you can call them by name whenever possible. And use nonverbal communication. I became the master of the, you know, like I see you, you know, the smile, the look, you know, not at the light touch on the shoulder to establish that connection and that rapport with students. So in our reflection questions, how does positive reinforcement assist with managing classroom behavior? I will say that it keeps your whole experience much more positive and keeps things running smoothly and doesn't wear you down or bring on negative emotions for you as the teacher. And it's really important, right? You want to stay in your teaching zone and you want to be up and having a good time. And then the second one is, why is it important to have a clear understanding of rules or expectations? I think that's human nature. I know with my boss, I want to know where the guide rails are. I want to know what he expects and what won't fly. And kids really need that structure. So it's if you walk in and it's like, oh yeah, that's Mrs. Higgins' rules. Okay. That just helps set your students up for success and you too. So this is a fun little section that my friend Janine Flores from Los Angeles County Office of Education gave me an assist with student engagement strategies. And she knows I'm a big fan of Moira Rose. So that's my little Moira Rose intro. So what is student engagement? And really, it's just the students being excited and participating, right, in the whole time that you're teaching. That's what you want. Like you have a precious 45 minutes to an hour. You have things you want to get done and you need all that good stuff. You need all that time and you need everybody to be on board and participating. So here's a couple tips on how to do that. These are 3 strategies: turn and talk, think, pair, share, and divide and conquer. And these are not arts specific strategies, but they work in the art forms. And Janine set these slides up from the lens of music. So let me go through them one by one. So the first one, turn and talk. So she says here, ideal for stand partners. That means if you have a music stand, you're side by side. But basically each student is processing the information and sharing it with their partner, just, just one-on-one, just the two of them talking. And the teacher can observe that sharing is happening back and forth and do an informal assessment on students, right? So it is, they're talking in groups and you are monitoring. So it gives them that ability to process and check each other. This one is similar, think, pair, share, but there's an addition of thinking time, right? So you're thinking, then you're pairing, and then you're sharing out. And so if you have a big classroom, you can divide a group by sections or shirts or what have you. But again, it's managing larger numbers and giving them time to process something that you're teaching, check for understanding with each other, and you as a teacher are working the room and seeing what's going on. And then finally, divide and conquer. So again, we're using the music as an example, but how to hear and assess smaller student groups. So you divide into rows or in columns, and you observe the playing row while the other rows are busy getting ready to review. And so you move around the classroom. So you could do that with dance, right? Where each group has something they're supposed to work on. Then you move around as the teacher to hear and assess. So, there's just one of you and there's a lot of students. And so, these strategies are meant to preserve your energy and work smarter and not harder. So my reflection questions are, how does partnering students increase their engagement, right? It's a peer-to-peer thing. And so, you don't want to be wearing yourself out by being up there, yep, talking. You want to give them time to talk to each other and engage with each other and kind of reinforce things together, right? And then the second question, in what ways does increased engagement make classroom management easier? And I think that's a very easy question to answer, right? If students care about what you're doing and are not fiddling around or under their desk or trying to look at their phone, your teaching life is going to be so much easier. It's so much more fun. And I want that for everybody. So just to summarize, and you might write this down in your notes, what is one takeaway from this presentation that you can start using in your practice? So we talked about standards, which is what we're teaching. We talked about framework, which is how we're teaching it. I talked about 3 major pedagogies that I think will be with us for quite some time. Talked about some classroom management tools and also a few ideas about student engagement. So think about the 1 or 2 things that you can take away from this presentation or discuss with a friend or a fellow artist. I also want to point out some mini advertisement. There are lots of free arts resources on my website, lots of webinars, standards, videos, podcasts. There's just a ton of stuff. I think I'm at 25 pages and counting. And all you have to type in is into a browser is RCOE and a space and arts. And a couple that I have here at the top is an integrated literature and art lesson on Frida Kahlo. Demystifying the framework if you're really excited about the framework, it's a 2-hour presentation about the framework, just the framework. And then the elementary art standards, I have reformatted those for easy printing and having little binders if as an artist you want to really bone up on, okay, what are the standards that I need for each grade level? So there's a lot there and that's all free to you. So I invite you to check it out. So that is the end of my presentation. I really appreciate your time and your professionalism to spend the time going through it. And you can always email me. There's my email there if I can be of further assistance from you. So thank you for your artistry and thank you for all you do for students. Bye-bye.